We're 7 months into starting our 7th month and talking about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And I know, excuse me, that some of you, ever since the first month, ever since we first started talking about this whole idea of following, there's some of you who have got up on Sunday mornings, stood in front of a mirror and gone, what do followers wear? Hasn't that been the question on your mind? I'm sure that some of you ladies got up in the morning and you stood in front of this mirror and you go, what do followers wear? Well, this morning, we're going to answer that question for you because I know you've been waiting in eager anticipation. You don't look like you're eagerly anticipating this tonight, all right? This whole idea of what a follower is supposed to wear. Now, we recognize people when they have certain things on that they're wearing, and we are able to identify, who they are, that they are followers. Give you a little quiz this morning, all right? There are going to be pictures that come up on the screen. I want you to yell out who these people are followers of this morning, okay? Are you ready? Everybody ready? Go like this. I'm ready. All right, here we go. First picture. Who are these followers of? All right, what's on top of that guy's head? He's a cheesehead from the Green Bay Packers. Okay, next one. Who? Dallas Cowboys. Can we hear it for the Cowboys? Yeah. Super Bowl this year, baby. All right. Who's this guy a follower of? Pistols are going to be firing at other people this morning. All right. All right. Who's this guy a follower of? Little Boomer Schooner there going, I don't see the ponies, though. That's what I want to see. Boomer and Sooner. All right. Who's this guy follow up? The Thunder. And guys, let's go back. All right. Don't give me those next ones yet. After this week and the trades, the Thunder are going to be a whole lot more fun to follow this year. So, yeah, PG-13, way to go. All right. Okay. Now, this is true of... Go back one if you would. Let's not jump in. We know about sports fans and the fact that they're followers of, but even in different religions, we are able to tell who they're a follower of by the clothes that they wear. Now, this picture. Who are these ladies followers of? It's really funny. Both services, it's like, Allah, I'm in church, I'm not supposed to mention that name, or something of that nature. We get real quiet and stuff. Right. These are followers of Islam, or Allah, Muslims, and they have some distinctive garb, especially the women wear some distinctive garb, so that you know that they're followers. Now, in Christianity, we have some options of different ways that people dress to figure out who they're a follower of. So we have option one, this guy. You just want to be a follower of him, don't you? I don't know, if you guys are a pro football player, and if you've been watching pro football since like the 60s, this guy has made a living of going from stadium to stadium, and he's always on, one of the channels, and he's shaking that afro. Man, I don't know how you get an afro that color, but anyway, and says John 3:16, so maybe he's a follower of Jesus. And that's one way where you distinguish, or there's these guys. With their signs, and they're from a particular church up in Kansas, and they have decided that they're going to be very strict about some things that they say, and it's not really things that, so would you like to follow whoever they're following? No. Probably not at all. Now, the things that we wear sometimes kind of push the agenda of who we're followers. Now, that was kind of two ends of the spectrum. But here's something. The Apostle Paul, who's a guy who wrote most of the New Testament, he actually told us what followers of Jesus are supposed to wear. And that should make you a little nervous since he lived 2,000 years ago before the invention of buttons or zippers. And so, but he's going to tell us what he believes that Jesus would have his followers wear. Now, there's some things you got to know about the Apostle Paul. And that is that before he was the Apostle Paul, he was a guy known as Saul from Tarsus, and he hated Christians. So that may give you a little pause about what he wants you to wear also. And he wanted to destroy Christians. In fact, we're told in Acts, he said, my main purpose in life for a number of years of his life was to hunt down Christians, throw them in jail, and if he could, kill them. That was what his purpose, that's what his mission was in life. Now this guy, though, he made a change in his life. He actually became a Jesus follower. And he started, instead of hunting down Christians and putting them in jail, he started going to all these places outside of Jerusalem, all around the Mediterranean Sea, the rim of the Mediterranean Sea, and he would go into a Jewish synagogue, and he began talking about who Jesus was. He would say, hey, maybe you've heard some of the news that's going out of Jerusalem recently. This guy named Jesus, he was the Messiah. He died, and after he died, 3 days later, he came back to life, and the resurrection is real. And he began talking about the proofs of the resurrection, and eyewitnesses would share some of their stories about it. And many of the Jewish people would say, oh, we don't want to hear this, and they would push Paul out of the synagogues after a period of time. But generally, this is what was happening. We read this in the book of Acts, which is like a history of the early church. These guys, some of the guys in the synagogue would come up to Paul later on that evening and say, tell us more about this. Tell us more about this Jesus guy. How does this fit within the Jewish scriptures? And not only did some of the Jewish guys do that, people do that, maybe 10 or 20 out of the synagogue, but a bunch of Gentile people in which Paul was making tents in the marketplace, and he'd get in conversations with them about who this Jesus person was, and they would start asking Paul about who Jesus was. What do followers of Jesus, look like? What do they do? What's their belief system? Things of that nature. And so the Apostle Paul would take these Jews and these Gentiles, people who didn't have any Jewish background, and he would go back to the words of Jesus, things that were already kind of being circulated around in Papaya by Mark and some other people, and he would say, here's the words of Jesus, and he would try to explain it, take it out of the Jewish context and put it in the context and words and nouns and things that these Gentile Christians would understand the words of Jesus. And he would particularly, almost every one of his writings, he wrote half the New Testament, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and 1st and 2nd Aliens. Oh, that's not one of them. But anyway, he wrote half of the New Testament. And as he wrote those things, he would take these words of Jesus and especially seemed to key in on certain things that Jesus taught and explain to them further. And I think the reason he did that is because there was a problem that every person who's ever been involved in a religious movement has, and that is we tend to fixate on certain rituals and traditions that we have to do. Now, here's one of the commands, here's one of the things that Jesus taught, and Paul brings this out in one way or another in every one of his books. John records it for us in the 13th chapter of his biography of Jesus when he says this, John 13:34. It's where Jesus kind of set some behavioral standards for his followers, and he did it in very simple terms. Now, John 13 says this. He says, a new command I give you. Now, you're all on the edge of your seats. A new command? Really? What's this new command all about? And when Jesus says this, he says, the new command I give you is to love one another. How many of you have ever heard that command before? All right. And I think the people who were following Jesus at the time said, new command? I've heard that a dozen times. My grandfather used to always say, you got to love one another. But Jesus adds something to it that makes it a little more distinct, and it kind of showcases what he wants the behavior of his followers to do. Very simple terms. He says, I give you this new command to love one another. How? As I have loved you, you must love one another. Now, we love that idea of love one another, but we generally put qualifiers on it. We generally say, I got to love you just like you love me. And if you don't love me very well, with you, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And because you're not loving me the way I want to be loved, I'm not going to love you the way you want to be loved. It's just that way. And we get all these little games that we start playing one way or the other. But Jesus didn't say you're to do these, love one another as I have one another you, or as you have one another to each other. He says, love one another just as I have loved you. A whole different deal. And it's said in a whole different way. In other words, the way that Jesus loved his disciples, that's the way he wanted the disciples to love other people, the followers to love people. Maybe Jesus at the time fleshed this out a little bit more. Perhaps he said, Matthew, do you remember the first time I met you? And Matthew goes, oh yeah, I was sitting at that tax table. I was trying to collect a little extra cash for the weekend off of you guys. And he said, you guys came up to me, and Jesus said, yeah, what did I say to you? And he said, you said, follow me. And I was looking at Peter, and I thought he was going to spit on me at the time. And when you said, follow me, all the other guys were going, because tax collectors have cooties, and don't want anything to do with those guys. And I was a tax collector, but I followed you. And Jesus said, that's right, Matthew, you follow me. I want you to love other people just like I loved you on that day. Nathaniel, do you remember the first thing you said about me? Nathaniel, you remember first thing that came out of your mouth when you saw me at a different, you didn't realize that I heard you, but I did. You remember what you said? And Nathaniel probably went, yeah, I remember. You said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Nate, you dissed my whole family, my city, my town, my relatives. I mean, can anything good? What about that? You remember you said that about me. And Nathaniel would have said, yeah, that's what I said, all right. And Jesus would probably said, do you remember how I responded? And Nathaniel would have said, yeah, you said, follow me. And so Jesus would say, so now I want you to love other people even as I have loved you. That's the kind of love I'm talking about. Love one another as I have loved you. And then he said this, and this is the part that drove so much of what the Apostle Paul would teach the new Christians in these churches that he had planted all around the Mediterranean Sea. He says this in verse 35. He says, by this, all men will know. What will they know? That you're my disciples. That's another word for follower. They'll know that you're my follower. How? If you have love for one another. What kind of love? That you love them as I have loved you. And so he says, you got to love one another. You got to want another the way I want another Jew. All right? Not the way you want to do it, but you do it in this way. And that's how people will see that you're a Jesus follower. They're going to say, he must be a Jesus follower because, guys, look at the way he loves people who are hard and difficult to love. It is so easy to love some people. Have you ever been around people that it's just so easy to love them, at least for the first 10 minutes you're around them? Generally, with everybody that you come in contact with, for a period of time, man, you go, that person is so easy to get along with. They're so easy to love. And then after a while, there's just certain things that begin to rub you the wrong way, and you don't really like them. They don't like the way they do that any longer, and you don't like the way they form their mouth when they talk this way, and you don't like the way they spit when they talk, and on and on and on and on and on and on. And Jesus says, you are to love them as I have loved them. Not the way you think they ought to be, but the way they are. You love one another. It's a whole different ballgame. He says, and this is what will distinguish you as being a Jesus follower. Now, here's the deal, okay? Here's the problem across the board. Gosh, I'm glad I got a pretty much basically a Christian audience this morning. Let me clue you in on something. The longer you're a Christian, the longer you're a follower of Jesus, the gravitational pull in your life is to go towards some doctrine. Doctrine's not bad. Some ritual, some routine that you know that you can do, and you say, that's the mark of a Christian. That's true of any religion. We saw the pictures, for instance, of people who are followers of Allah, of Islam. And they wear distinctive head coverings and things like that. And that's the way they distinguish themselves. And they believe that that is what makes them and marks them as a follower of Allah. And so they adhere to that tradition. The gravitational pull of all of religion is that it pulls you to a routine or tradition or something like that, away from relationships. The evidence of a person who is a Jesus follower, two things. One, it's the way that you relate to Jesus. And two, it's the way you treat other people. Because Jesus said, this is a new commandment I give you. Love one another how? As I have loved you, all right? So the way you relate to me and the way you treat other people, that is the evidence of whether or not you're a follower of Jesus. Unfortunately, we have gone the way of religion, and we have pulled pulled away from the way we treat other people, and we crystallize on a certain few things that we do or that we believe or that we think has to have as a tradition within our lives. The gravitational pull of religion is always towards rule keeping rather than relationship building. Now let me tell you why. Because if it's rule keeping, I'm in control. I want to tell you, every morning, every day when I get up, there's something that I do every day, and I love doing it. And it makes me feel so good every time I do it. You say, brush your teeth? No. I make a list of the things that I need to do that day, all right? I'm a list maker deluxe. I apologize in advance. Some of you aren't on my list today, but anyway, the fact is I make a list of the things that I feel like are important for me to accomplish today. And I feel supreme joy in my life when I click that thing off. And I've had different apps on my phone anymore, so I can click on it, but it just doesn't have quite the satisfaction of writing it down and drawing a line through it and saying, yes, I'm king of the world because I got this one task done, all right? I brushed my teeth this morning, okay? So there's certain things that I do to make myself feel good, and that's accomplishing my mission, the things that I think are important. And when I check those things off, I feel really good about myself. The problem is in our relationship with God, we crystallize it into a religion and thinking that if I do this, this, and this, then I can control God. He will do what I want him to do. If I have a quiet time in the morning, is quiet time good for you? You bet it is. And if you're not doing it, I'll tell you, you're missing out on something that will help you grow and build your relationship with God. But I do it not to earn brownie points. I do it because I want to have a good relationship with Jesus. There are things that we do in our service every week. If you've attended our church very long, you know that every week we have communion every Sunday, the Lord's Supper. And we do it because we feel like that's an important part of a worship time and gathering of Christians, that we recognize the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's the one way Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. And we think that that's important. Is it necessary for salvation? Let me think about that. No, it's really not. Now, when I do it, it makes me feel very good about myself. It makes me understand a little bit more of the sacrifice that Jesus had on my behalf, so that because I'm a follower of his. That's a positive thing. But if I say, because I took communion this morning and I checked that off my list, and I can treat you like crap the rest of the day, then I've missed the point. I've missed the whole point. The new commandment that Jesus gave is that we are to love one another, even as I have loved you. And this is the way people will know that you are my followers, the way you love one another. And that is the difference between a relationship and religion. Jesus is saying, I'm asking you to love other people the way I have loved you. Not to be able to concoct your own religion and say, oh, I'm okay with God and I can treat other people any way I want to because I've done X, Y, Z and I've checked those things off and now I'm sure God is okay with it. Wrong, he's not. The gravitational pull of all religion is towards some sort of rule-keeping scheme in which we try to box in God. Rule-keeping is good. It can help your relationship. But rule-keeping does not replace loving God and loving people. It does not. And so Jesus says, don't fight that gravitational pull. Don't ever try to replace the way you treat people with some kind of ritual or routine, because that's not the thing that Jesus wants to distinguish you as one of his followers. This is the way people will know you follow me. How? By the way you love one another. Jesus said it plain and simple. And what characterizes you as one of the followers of Jesus is that you love like Jesus loved. Now, it's easy to think as long as I have my disciplines, my prayer time, and my do's and my don'ts, I don't do this and I do this, and that substitutes for actually following Jesus as it relates to how we treat people. You know, it's much easier to check something off a list than it is to love people who are difficult to love. And see, Jesus says, this is the thing that makes you different than the world. The thing that's going to distinguish you as a follower, the thing that will be the stamp on your behavior, is whether or not you treat people the way Jesus treated them. I don't think Jesus is fond of his followers treating people that he died for like crap. Don't think so at all. Now, 22 years after Jesus made that statement, the Apostle Paul comes along. As I said, he's trying to take Jesus' statements and explain them in ways that the Gentile people can understand and apply them to their life. And so he takes some of the things that Jesus says and he begins to say to them, hey, here's the way we carry this out. Here are some of the ways that we can carry this out. Because what Paul recognized is the same thing every person who's been a leader in a church recognizes, all right? Paul would establish these churches. People who come to Christ, they are excited about being a follower of Jesus. They want to know about it. They spend time studying. They begin to find out a little nuances of what Jesus has to say. It excites them. But the longer they become a follower, they begin to slip into rule keeping. And they begin to get away from the loving one another, and they stick to rule keeping, which has a tendency to make you a very sad sack person, all right? You know, sometimes you wonder if Christians were baptized in pickle juice because they just, all the time. That's because they've started sucking on the religion idea that it's what I do, and they can't keep all those rules, and so it makes them a really sad person all the time. But they say, at least I'm doing X, Y, Z, and you're not doing A, B, C, so therefore I hate you. And we get all sorts of denominations going in this world as a result of that. And the result is Jesus says, whoa, wait a minute. And Paul says, let's back up a little bit. So the Apostle Paul takes this idea of loving each other and he made it specific. He gave words, he gave illustrations, he gave adjectives, he gave nouns to what would characterize a Jesus follower. So today we're going to look at the way he tells the people in Colossae how to dress. Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. We've already said it once today. Let's look at it again. Colossians 3:12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, if you're a follower of Jesus, let's go back the other way. Keep going back to what we had on the screen originally there, if we could. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly beloved. In other words, what he's saying is, if you're a follower, you know this, God chose you. He's the one that invited you to be a follower. And not only that, he says, you're dearly beloved by him. He says, so you do this, you clothe yourselves. Now, hold it there. Let's go back, all right? I don't want to bring that up on the screen until I'm ready for it again. So he's going to tell us how we are to clothe one another, right? So you've wanted to know, right, this morning. You got up. How am I supposed to dress myself as a Christian? I'm going to show you. Little music, please. Oh, they wouldn't do the music this morning. I wanted to have this dun, 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 dun. Now, I'm wearing a T-shirt this morning. Some of you are going, oh, no, I don't want to see this at all. All right. I'm wearing a T-shirt this morning, and I thought John and I sported them pretty good, but this is follow wear, all right? This is the way we're supposed to dress. Now, I've got a shirt over it because I didn't want my mom spinning in a grave because I could never wear a T-shirt to church. I mean, that was just something that was against the rules. You couldn't really be a follower. Anybody grow up during those times? All right. But believe it or not, I can be a follower of Jesus and wear this T-shirt in church and be in front preaching at the same time. But it just bothers me a little bit, so I'll put this over, okay? Now, all right. Now you know my limitations, okay? So here's the way we're supposed to clothe ourselves. He says, first of all, clothe yourself. What's the first word? Compassion, all right? So what does that mean? What does it mean to have compassion for somebody else, all right? In the English language, we have phrases that we use. We say sometimes, I love you with all my heart, all right? How many of you have ever said that? All right, guys, no guys are raising their hand right now, all right? I'll bet you that the night before your wedding, you said, you know, either before the rehearsal dinner or when you kissed her goodbye, you know, something like that, you said, I'll love you, honey, with all my heart. And you said it in such a way that your to-be wife went, oh, it's one of the great moments of all times. And tears were streaming down her cheek, and you manufactured a couple for yourself and things like that, all right? All right, you remember that time? Guys, you remember that? Oh, come on, you remember that. Okay, some of you do, okay. So when we say, I love you with all my heart, that has an idea of compassion behind it, all right? Now, the Greeks and the Romans said it a little bit differently. It's a little bit more gross, but when they talked about expressing compassion for somebody, they said, I love you with all my bowels. Has a ring to it, doesn't it, all right? In fact, I want you to try this out tonight, all right, guys? Guys, look up here for me just a minute, all right, guys? The rest of the afternoon, you take your wife to lunch today. I want you to treat her really nice with all respect. You know, just be very, very nice. Tonight, when you go home, you know, get in bed, put your arm around your wife and you say, honey, I love you with all my bowels. And see if that probably won't work. Never mind. I tried that last night, and I came first service all by myself this morning. So anyway, Paul says that I want you to clothe yourselves with this sense of compassion. And here's why it's important. He says, I want you to be able to hear what people says. Compassion means not just emoting over somebody, but it means when somebody talks to you, you hear what they say. You look for the emotions behind that. You see what they're experiencing. You see what they're experiencing, and regardless of whether or not what they're experiencing is a result of some stupidity in their life, okay? You know when it's hard for me to show compassion? Somebody's going, oh, this is the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me. Yeah, but you've done this 75 times. And it's always the most horrible thing, you know. Compassion means you don't go, okay? Honesty. Anybody wanted to do that at times? Some of you aren't honest. Okay. Compassion means you hear what they say, even though you warned them. Even though you've warned them 14 times. You hear what they say. You acknowledge that emotion that they're going through. Doesn't make their emotion right. It just means that you listening to them. I mean, we can make all kinds of excuses of why we don't extend compassion. And Jesus wants us to wear it as a clothing. He adds another word. Clothe yourselves with compassion and what? Kindness. Oh my goodness, kindness. You know what kindness is? Kindness is when you loan your strength to someone else. Kindness is when you exhibit your strength, you allow your strength to be used by someone else. You extend something to them. You loan them your strength. All right? So that's kindness. Sometimes hard to do. It's hard to be kind to people. I find that very difficult. Anybody else in that same boat with me? Yeah, sometimes it's very hard to be kind. Compassion, kindness, then the next one. What's the next word? You're not saying that very good. What's the next word? Humility. All right. Paul says, I want you to clothe yourselves with humility. Everybody kind of sort of knows what humility is, but remember, all these things are what they are in relationship to other people. So humility in relationship to other people is very simple. Humility is seeing myself as I really am in relationship with this other person. In other words, I look at them, I view myself accurately, and the accurate view of myself in relationship to other people is I'm nothing more than a human just like they're a human. We're both human beings. And the fact that I can jump higher or run faster or I make more or I make less doesn't negate the fact that both of us came into this world naked. And we don't have any control over the fact, we can't change the fact that where we were born, to whom we were born to, most of us can't even control when we die. There's an equality among us because we are human beings, that we've all been made in the image of God. And the things that are special, that make me special, the thing that makes you special, isn't that you have more money than I do. It isn't that you have more talent than I do, that you tell jokes any better than I do. Nobody can do that. Or I have more opportunity, or you're born into a better family. What makes you special is the very same thing that makes me special. I'm loved by God the Father. He created me. And there's certain things that He has endowed to me because He is the Creator. Humility allows me to approach you as a peer no matter what you do, no matter what you don't do, no matter how much you have, no matter how much you don't have, or how old you are or how young you are. There's a sense in which it doesn't matter how much I've accomplished or how little you've accomplished. We are peers in this world under the canopy of God's love, and we are to exude that kind of humility. And he goes on. He doesn't stop there. He says, add to humility what? What's that next word? Gentleness. It's a great word. You know what gentleness is? Gentleness is the decision that you make to respond to another person in light of your strength and weaknesses, and respond out of, and instead of responding out of your strength, I respond to you in your weakness. In other words, I rein my strength in to match your weakness so that I can go alongside of you. When we clothe ourselves with gentleness, we gear down to the level of the person. That doesn't mean we're condescending. Nothing to do with being condescending. Has everything to do with communicating that my relationship with you is more important than you being impressed by me. Also often in relationships, we go in trying to build ourselves up, show what a great resume we have so that we can impress somebody else. Gentleness is limiting that strength to gauge where the other person do. That my relationship with you is more important than you knowing my full capacity and my full strength. And so I'm going to adjust for your benefit. Gentleness. And then there's the next one. What's the next one? Patience. Basically, I've decided not to talk about that because I've not been able to live it out the last few days, all right? I've had 4 grandchildren at my house, and my patience is a little bit on the thin side right now. But patience, I figured out, at least for a small moment, what patience was yesterday. We're all in the van, we're heading towards Tulsa, and the guy in front of me seemed like he was going way too slow. Anybody been there? I was not being very patient. You know what patience is? Is going the speed of another person. Not trying to pass them, honk my horn and go, I want to go past them, all right? Patience is going the speed of another person, all right? And so Paul says, this is what I want you to put on in the morning, every morning. This is what I want you to be known for. When you get up in the morning, you put on all these virtues we've been talking about. And then he kind of summarizes it with a couple of basic thoughts. Verse 13, he says this, bear with each other and forgive. Bear with each other. Whew. Just a question. Don't have to raise your hand. Any of you living with a bear? Yeah, I didn't want you to raise your hand on that one, all right? So bear with the bear, all right? Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Oh, great. Then the next thing he says, forgive how? Whew, that's tough, isn't it? Because normally when we talk about forgiving somebody else, we want to forgive as they have forgiven us. No, it's forgive as God has forgiven us. In fact, what Paul is saying in this whole thing, okay, listen to me real quick. He says, I want you to be compassionate like God is compassionate with you. I want you to be gentle as God is gentle with you. Don't you think that there are times, God reveals this side of him quite often in the Old Testament. Isn't there times when you just feel like you go to God and you say, I will never, ever do that again. Anybody ever said that to God? And what did you do the next day? You did it again, right? And so you go back and say, I will never, ever do that again. And 20 seconds later, we do it again. And we keep saying that over and over again. And sometimes you just wonder if God wouldn't say, coordinates, Muskogee, Walnut Street, bam! You're done for. No. You're patient, like God is patient with you. You're gentle, like God is gentle to you. And God wants you to be known with extending that same kind of patience to other people around you. And he summarizes it by saying this, and over all these virtues, kind of like an overcoat he wants you to put on, all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Love is kind of the summary word, or the summary idea, for everything that he has said. And he said, these are things that I want you to list and put on every day of your life. This is follower. Now, if you will, let me be transparent for just a second, if you would, all right? And if you would, kind of give me a little grace in what I'm about to say here for just a second, okay? Because I read these things, patience, compassion, gentleness, goodness, things like that. I read those things, and what I want to say, there is no way in God's green earth that I can do those things. Been with me? Okay? You ever had those things happen in your life where you feel like there's just not any way I can do that? Matter of fact, I read those things and I say, that's fine when I'm getting up in the morning and I just have my quiet time and I've not talked to anybody yet. I can be those sorts of things. But just let me get to work, you know? And I can't, you know, the people I work with, it's hard to be nice around those guys, all right? I think I'm going to have to quit work and go to work at a church someplace. Oh, wait, I'm already there. Okay, so that doesn't help either. Some of you think, if I just worked at the church, I could be a nicer, patient person. You've not worked with me. You don't understand how difficult that is, all right? So that's what we think. There's not any way I can get that done in my life. But Paul says, you know what makes me think it's possible for me? Because of who wrote this. The Apostle Paul, if you know anything about personalities, he's as type A can get. He's the one that doesn't take no for an answer, kill everything in sight, move towards the goal and get it done. And yet Paul says, every morning when I get up, you know, this is what I do. Now, let me tell you this. Here's the Apostle Paul, and he's able to say, this is what I do, and you can see it lived out. You can see his life change and transform through his letters as you follow through the New Testament. But I hate to tell you this, friends. You may think you're pretty good stuff, but I doubt that anyone will know your name 2,000 years from now. I doubt that anybody's going to quote you. Now, if the internet's still up, some of my sermons may still be on there, right? But I doubt that anybody's going to even remember your name 2,000 years from now. But they remember Paul. Why? Because what he wrote? Partially. Because of what he thought? Partially. It's because of what he did and how his life was transformed and how when he accepted God's grace in his life, it worked itself out in other people's life that started a movement that 2,000 years later, we can't remember a third of the Caesars of Rome, but we all remember the Apostle Paul. Because God made a difference in his life. And he began to live out that difference that God made in his life. Now, the problem with most of us is we don't remember that it's not what we do on Sunday morning necessarily that counts. It's how we treat other people. Sunday through Saturday. I'm not going to say Monday through Friday because some of you take that literally and say, okay, I can be a snot on Saturday and Sunday, but that's not the way it goes, all right? Now, I want to think, how can I do this, okay? And the problem with a sermon like this is, even though I've made it very interesting, maybe I've given myself too much credit, you'll go to lunch and you'll talk about the pictures we showed of Pistol Pete or Boomer Schooner, things like that, and you're going to say, that was so good. But Monday morning when you wake up, you're going to say, I wonder what they got for us next week. I wonder if John and the band will be any better. Will James have an even better looking Hawaiian print shirt next week? What kind of follow-wear will he have on? You know, and we don't really remember these things. So I want you to remember them, all right? Okay, this is lame, all right? I shared this with the staff about 2 weeks ago, and they looked at me like, really? That's what you're going to do? So I know it's lame. I want you to say this with me. Just get it over with now. This is lame. Say that with me. Really say it hard. This is lame. All right. So your expectations where they want to do. All right. Here's how I want you to remember it. Guys, let me ask you a question. How many of you guys have ever seen a chick flick that was PG? How many of you have seen one? A chick flick? Some of the guys are going, I'm not raising my hand. There's no way. All right, let's be honest. How many of you have seen a chick flick that was PG, all right? Didn't you? I love it. We've got a couple of wives that are raising their husbands' hands back there. All right. It's hard to admit that we've seen such things in our life. But here's what I want you to remember. Monday morning, I want you to remember and put on a PG chick flick, all right? On Monday morning, when you get up, first thing, I want you to clothe yourselves. I want you to put on a PG chick flick. And here's what I mean by that. Here it is. PG, patience, gentleness. Chick, compassion, humility, kindness. Flick, forgiveness, love, kindness, all right? There's your PG chick flick, all right? So do this, all right? So PG stands for, P stands for what? Patience. G stands for what? Gentleness. C stands for what? Compassion. H stands for what? And K stands for what? Okay, there's PG chick. Now the flick, forgiveness. F stands for what? L stands for what? And K stands for what? Now, you'll probably say to me, James, this is really lame, but you've already said to that, so you don't have to say it again. But what you're going to say to me also is that there's twice that you mention kindness. In the text, there's not two kindnesses mentioned. Let me tell you why I did that. Is because I know you all very well. You need an extra dose of kindness, all right? So, PG chick flick, all right? Monday morning, you get up, and it's PG chick flick time, all right? Now, this doesn't come natural for us. Some of us, you have to really lean into some things. Some of them come more naturally. But for most of us, this doesn't come naturally at all. And that's why, as I said, we put kindness in there twice because you need an extra dose of that. Now, my idea is this. If you have quiet time in the morning, which I hope you do, when you're getting ready for work or you're in the car, during that time, I want you to say, God, today I clothe myself with PG chick flick, all right? I clothe myself with PG chick flick, all right? I clothe myself with patience. In other words, I'm going to gear myself down to the speed of others. I put on gentleness. I'll respond to those you bring into my life in light of their strengths and weaknesses instead of responding them out of my strength. Wouldn't that be great if everybody tomorrow put on PG chick flick, all right? Now, there's one more thing, and then I'm done this morning. When you put these things on, some of you say, it's not natural. That's right, it's not. So I'm not patience is not my bag. Everybody knows that. You put that on, you clothe yourself with patience, you know what's going to happen? People will notice a difference in your life because you're not normally patient. You put a double dose of kindness in your life, that might equal a half dose for some of you, all right? And you exhibit kindness, by the Holy Spirit's power, the fruit of the Spirit in your life, you demonstrate kindness, people are going to notice that. It will make a difference. So when you clothe yourselves with PG chick flick, it's going to make a difference in other people's life. Now, besides that, if you don't think, what's your other option? Is your option this? Going to stand out on a street corner to let everybody know that you're a Christian by holding your sign or wearing your follow wear? Is that the way you show that you're a Christian? No. They really don't care. Because you know what this is? This is trying to make a point. All this is trying to make a point. If Jesus wanted to make a point, he could have ascended from heaven, preached the Sermon on the Mount in about 30 minutes, and gone back home, and that was it. He would have made his point. But it wouldn't have made any difference. Jesus didn't come to make a point. Jesus came to make a difference. And the way he made a difference was showing that patience, that gentleness, that compassion, that humility, that kindness, that forgiveness, that loveness, that kindness in his life. He went to the cross and died for you and your stupidity. He died for you when you were at your worst. He made a difference. He didn't just make a point. And Jesus wants you as his follower to quit making points. You may win an argument, you don't make any difference at all. And the difference is made when we love people the way God loved us through Christ his Son. So let me just say this. Maybe it's a big part of, I think, why many of you who are watching online this morning have dropped out of church, and you don't give church a second thought. It's because you met too many undressed or half-dressed Christians who had the routine down, who had the answers down, who had the ritual, the right words, but they weren't dressed properly. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I hope you never abandon your quest to be a follower of Jesus simply because you've met some of us who didn't get dressed in the morning. I've got an idea, though. Tomorrow morning, let's all get up and clothe ourselves with PG chick flicks, all right? And you know what will happen? It'll make a difference. It'll make a difference because just as God's overwhelming love made a difference in you, God's overwhelming love will make a difference through you as you clothe yourself with love. Let's pray. Father, I just confess I'm glad this is over with. And I thank you. I thank you so much. I thank you so much for preserving these ancient words for us that could have been written yesterday instead of 2,000 years ago. And Father, some in this room have been victims of misguided religious people. And others of us have been a part of perpetuating terrible things on people. All kinds of rejection. Sometimes in the name of Jesus. Father, we know that was religion, not relationship. And we're so sorry. So give us each the wisdom to know what to do with what we have just heard. And then the courage and the power to do it as we continue to endeavor to become followers of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. It's whose name we pray. Amen.